I knew the axe was coming the moment Jackson forgot to include me in the risk committee sync, the one I'd founded, scheduled, and hosted for 6 straight years. Picture this: 9:03 a.m., Monday. I'm cradling a chipped ceramic mug from the 2018 SEC Compliance Summit that reads, "Rules are sexy." Lukewarm gas station coffee, same as always. My calendar's blocked for our monthly governance overview, the one session I never miss. I click the Zoom link. Nothing. Slack? Crickets. Then a ping. "Hey Claire," the message read. "Did Jackson mean to leave you off this week's review?" From Alex, an old intern who somehow boomeranged back as director of strategic ops. Cue the start of every corporate horror film ever made. I didn't need a second opinion. I knew. Let's rewind. Officially, I was the director of compliance infrastructure at Virion Capital, a boutique fintech/private equity Frankenstein that thought disruption was a job title. Unofficially, I was the sandbag between them and an SEC flood. I didn't make product decks. I didn't attend offsites with hashtag walls and catered poke bowls. I mapped access logs. I caught authorization anomalies. I watched the wire transfers like my rent depended on it, because, well, it did. Not glamorous. No branded Patagonia vests. No VIP badges at Davos. But the devs trusted me. The legal team feared me, in a respectful way. And the board? They called me bulletproof. I kept Virion from dancing over regulatory tripwires quarter after quarter. And then came Jackson Vale, the heir to the CEO's empire, groomed in a prep school blazer and fed on a steady diet of Stanford TED Talks and venture capital arrogance. His first words to me during our intro meeting? "So, compliance, do you guys do like policies and stuff?" I smiled. "I keep us out of prison." He blinked, didn't even crack a grin. 2 weeks after Martin Vale, our founder and my old boss, went out on sudden medical leave, triple bypass, triggered by stress and possibly Jackson was named interim COO. That was the beginning. The governance reviews? Axed. Vendor compliance audits? Put on ice. He even posted a selfie on LinkedIn with the caption, "Compliance should empower, not restrain. We're not regulators. We're rocket fuel." The comments were a buzzword graveyard. I stayed silent, watching. At first. See, I've weathered reorgs, downturns, a product recall, and a CFO indictment. I've learned to keep receipts, all of them. I don't hoard out of paranoia. I archive out of survival. I'd watched policies get rewritten in Slack threads and approvals rubber-stamped with custom emojis. Every deviation, every shortcut. I cataloged it all. Not to snitch, but because I knew, one day, someone like Jackson would arrive, and I had to be ready. They called me the firewall behind closed doors, the invisible failsafe. The moment he started yanking out wires, I didn't shout. I started documenting. Jackson's first real move? Dismantling compliance from the inside. He called it Velocity 2.0. A joke. A rebrand. A slow knife. The slide deck he presented was insultingly juvenile. Stock photos of race cars, fire emojis, and a bullet list of obsolete roles. My title? Second on the list. No names, just Director Compliance Infrastructure. Like I was an extra line item in a spreadsheet someone forgot to delete. My inbox went quiet after that. No more team check-ins. No more asks for log reviews. Even the devs started avoiding me. Not out of malice, but the way you avoid a coworker who's already halfway out the door. I became radioactive. Still, I stayed late. Not out of duty, out of strategy. I began tagging everything, creating encrypted backups, downloading logs, routing metadata, hashing policy files with timestamps. I even bought a secondary drive labeled Q3 Vendor Audit, but firewalled 6 layers deep. Because when someone thinks compliance is optional, I make sure they learn it's not. The firing didn't come with a calendar invite. Of course not. Jackson waited until his weekly leadership sync, a meeting he'd turned into a no-agenda ego fest, to pull the trigger. He had a protein shake in one hand and that smug, frat boy on a tech stage grin that made me want to staple his resume to a fire extinguisher. "Before we wrap," he said casually, tossing his MacBook closed like he was finishing a keynote nobody asked for. "Just one quick org update. Claire, our Director of Compliance Infrastructure, will be transitioning out, effective immediately." Silence. One confused snort. From HR's Jessica, I think. Everyone else? Frozen. Jackson grinned wider, scanning the virtual gallery for applause that didn't come. "Let's be honest," he continued. "Her role doesn't really exist anymore. We're not in 2010, begging for regulatory grace. We're building momentum. Compliance should advise, not control." Then he looked directly at me. "You had a cute little title," he added, "but you're just legacy weight from my father's playbook." That word, legacy, landed like a punch to the lungs, not because it was cruel, but because it was calculated. He'd picked the one term that reduced 6 years of holding the company together into an expired file folder. I didn't flinch. I closed my pen, folded my notes, stood up from the table, and said just 3 words. "I see. Understood." No scene, no gasp. Just the kind of quiet that follows a pulled fire alarm. Everyone waiting to see if smoke comes next. It didn't. Not yet. I walked straight to my desk. I didn't pack my plants. Didn't take the framed SEC and me cartoon Martin had once given me as a joke. I left the coffee mug, the keyboard wrist pad, even the half-empty LaCroix in the drawer. The only thing I took? A slim black hard drive, labeled Q3 Vendor Audit, encrypted like a vault. Inside, 6 years' worth of what most companies pretend don't exist. Access logs for customer overrides, Slack approvals rubber-stamped with GIFs, unlogged financial flows through unvetted third parties, policy rewrites slipped into production with fake timestamps, and one PDF, 72 pages, of altered controls never cleared by legal. No commentary. No rants. Just facts. Tagged. Versioned. Cross-referenced. That night, I sat on my tiny patio with a flat ginger ale and cracked open the SEC Whistleblower portal like it was a job app. No rush. No drama. Just batch uploads. One packet at a time. I named them. Discrepancy, A1, Delta Logs Public-Private Deviation Risk Tree, Cold Storage Trail. Each was clean, legally coherent, no editorializing, just code, compliance, and criminal oversight. The final file, labeled simply Legacy. It contained the most damning string, a digital backdoor manually enabled during Q2 that allowed Jackson to access customer financials tied to a flagged crypto wallet. No multi-factor approval, no paper trail. Just fingerprints. His. I didn't write a preamble, no manifesto, no closing statement. I wasn't a martyr. I wasn't a whistleblower in a movie. I was a systems mirror, and I was showing the reflection. I clicked Submit. The portal gave me a standard confirmation message in sterile Arial font. "Thank you. Preliminary review in progress." I shut the laptop, and then I just sat. No adrenaline, no tears. Just the weird hum of a kitchen refrigerator and the sense of knowing something irreversible had just happened. Not with a bang, but with a click. The next few days were a masterclass in public relations gaslighting. Jackson launched what he called Project Clearfield. It sounded like a real estate scam or maybe a skincare line. But no. It was his full-blown campaign to sell the narrative that compliance wasn't being gutted, just modernized. A post went up on Virion's blog, Efficiency Over Obstruction, a new era of scalable governance. It had a high-gloss photo of Jackson standing in my old conference room, now repurposed as his war room. Whiteboard behind him, the words, "Friction kills momentum," circled in red marker like it was revolutionary scripture. My name wasn't in the post. Of course. But the systems I'd built? They were now labeled legacy overhead. The exact protocols that had kept the company out of hot water for years, now described as unscalable, restrictive, outdated. I read the article 3 times. No jaw clench, no tears. But something in me shifted, like a tide pulling back before a storm. Then came the interviews. Tech sites, fintech influencers, even a quote in Fast Ledger praising Jackson's risk-positive leadership. One LinkedIn post stuck out. Finally, a COO who's not afraid to move fast and break compliance. They thought it was clever. That's when I started a new folder. Not for the SEC. This one was for me. Screenshots, blog links, comments from investors praising his agility. Proof that I hadn't hallucinated at all. Because if the whole thing got buried, if the PR smoke was thick enough, I needed to remind myself, no, you didn't imagine it. You were there. Then came the whispers. A tweet from a startup whisperer at Cinder Capital. A Slack DM from an old dev. You hear the Euro firms poking around? Rumor is Jackson's pushing for an acquisition. Of course he was. Suddenly the pieces clicked. The speed, the erasure, the fire emojis and streamlining. He wasn't just rewriting policy. He was cleansing history. If the acquisition went through, my archive might not just be ignored. It could be rendered moot. The sins I documented could be rebranded as legacy missteps or swept away in the haze of a strategic pivot. And if the due diligence process didn't include a forensic sweep, it was game over. I began walking every day, nowhere in particular. 3 miles around the block. Come home. Microwave pasta I didn't eat. Refresh the SEC submission portal like it was a Twitter feed. Nothing. Then, on a dull Tuesday, it happened. A new email. Not from the automated portal. This one had a name. Subject: clarification requested. Authorization logs. It was short, clinical, but real. They were asking about a routing structure I had labeled Alt Path 7A, the exact trail tied to customer account deletions from the previous summer. No accusations, no urgency. Just one line that said everything I needed to know. Could you elaborate on the logic behind bypass paths for internal approval workflows? I reread the message 5 times before breathing. Someone had actually read the files, not skimmed, not boxed and archived. Read. I responded with precision, attached a chart, explained the logic in clean, unambiguous English. No snark, no emotion, just the truth. The bypass. The motive, the origin. A few hours later, silence. But it wasn't the same kind as before. This wasn't a void. It was coiled tension. The kind you feel when a room is holding its breath. Later that week, I caught a segment on late-night business news. One of those startup panels with too many buzzwords and not enough facts. A guy in a fitted vest, definitely Jackson's type, was saying, "Regulations are just speed bumps. Winners drive over them." The crowd laughed. I muted the TV, leaned back, and smiled to myself. Because Jackson? He hadn't just driven over a bump. He'd launched off a cliff, and I had the crash footage. Another email hit my inbox. No greeting, no sign-off, just this. Are you available to clarify internal authorization path logs? Short, focused, but very, very specific. They weren't circling anymore. They were digging. They had found the routing structure Jackson's team used to skip approval chains to get sign-off-free movement through the compliance system. That's not just negligence, that's intent. And intent is the difference between oops and indictment. I sat down and wrote the cleanest, most legally sound email of my career. No metaphors, no emotion, just timestamps, logs, and decision flows. Origin: Jackson's executive login. Timestamp: during an internal blackout window. Method: Revoked user tokens to bypass two-factor result. Full access, zero oversight. Evidence, visual diagram, annotated entries, decrypted API logs. It wasn't a whistleblower file, it was ammunition. I hit send, then I waited. But this time, it wasn't dread, it was calculation. Later that night, I checked an old Slack channel, Hatchet Team Updates, one of the few they forgot to remove my read-only access from. Sloppy. A product manager had posted a selfie from a downtown cafe. In the background, Jackson, holding court with a tech reporter. The caption, "Brad says we're audit-proof now. Big push coming." Audit-proof. I nearly dropped my tea. The idiocy of saying that, on the record, during an open SEC investigation? Not boldness, terminal hubris. Minutes later, I got a text from Maya. She'd been a senior analyst under me for 4 years. Used to call me compliance mom and sneak granola bars into late-night audit sessions. "Hey, you didn't hear this from me. Jackson's meeting with Cinder Capital Friday. Says we're bulletproof. Claims the system's airtight. They're going public next week." I stared at the message for a solid minute. Then I smiled. Because that was it. The moment. The peak arrogance phase. The part where the golden boy, high off his own PR fumes, lights the match without realizing the room is already soaked in gasoline. He thought the story was his to write. He didn't know the ending had already been submitted. That night, I didn't upload anything new. Just re-verified the timestamps of 3 key files in my archive. 1. The last backdoor override. 2. The unapproved policy rollout. 3. The Slack message where Jackson said, "Just push it live. We'll figure out compliance later." Each was time-locked. Each was traceable. Each was already sitting in the SEC's hands. I didn't need to add more. The rope was already tied. All he had to do now was walk into it. 3 weeks. 21 days of absolute silence from the SEC portal. No follow-up, no request, no login confirmation. Just the same sterile line. Preliminary review in progress. I refreshed obsessively at first, every 2 hours like a lab rat on a sugar drip. By the second week, it was twice a day. By the third, I stopped opening it entirely. The silence didn't hum. It weighed, like fog with gravity. I started avoiding my laptop. Unread emails stacked up like junk mail. My confidence, once steel-edged and clinical, softened at the edges. Maybe they thought I was just bitter. Maybe they flagged it as workplace revenge. Maybe they were buried in bigger scandals, and I was just static. That Friday, out of pure masochism, I walked past Virion's office tower. The etched glass plaque that used to say "Integrity through Innovation" was gone, replaced with something that looked like a crypto startup's logo and the words "Build Fast." All caps. No irony. The building buzzed, lights on, people still typing. Jackson, no doubt, still inside spinning his web for anyone with a LinkedIn Premium badge. The next morning, I got cornered by Diane, my neighbor with too many Facebook group subscriptions and an addiction to other people's business. "Hey, Claire," she said, with that tilt of sympathy people weaponize. "If you ever want to talk, or need help with job stuff." I smiled, waxed. "Oh, I'm fine. Consulting, actually. Keeping busy." She lit up. Box achieved. "Oh, that's great! You always struck me as one of those smart, organized types." Organized, sure. My entire life now lived in folders labeled violation logs, bypass paths, reasons I don't sleep. That night, I opened the fridge. Same 3 items. Leftover quinoa, expired yogurt, a bag of shredded cheese that smelled like loss I didn't eat. I didn't sit. I just stood there in the glow of the fridge, letting the silence press against me until midnight. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a text, not a call, a calendar alert. Something I'd forgotten to delete. Board review? Risk exposure briefing. Monday, 10 a.m. Location, Exec Room 1A. That was my meeting, my framework. Every quarter, I'd build a brutal, unflinching map of weak spots, compliance gaps, risk thresholds, the warning signs no one wanted to see. Now, someone else would be standing there, or maybe no one at all. Maybe Jackson killed the session and left the board staring into a vacuum. I just sat on the couch and stared at the alert. Didn't sting. It ached. Not because I missed the job, but because I realized the machine was still spinning, still smiling, without the one person who tried to hit the brakes. And I wondered, did I go too quietly? Was I so professional, so by the book, that they never even felt the tremor? But I'd sent the files. I'd lit the match. Why did it still feel like I whispered into a canyon? I powered off the phone and let the darkness fold around me. Heavy, still. Because sometimes the hardest part of lighting the fuse is waiting to see if it ever catches fire. Monday morning broke gray and stale. Same faded pajamas, same bitter gas station coffee, same lingering doubt that anything would come of this. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not a recruiter, not a job board notification, not another "we're hiring governance ninjas" email. It was Maya. No emojis, no warm-up, just 4 words. "Did you hear yet?" I frowned, replied, "Hear what?" 30 seconds later, she called. Her voice was low and quick, like she was reporting from inside a hostage situation. "They're here." "Who?" "The SEC." My breath caught. Unmarked sedan, 3 guys in suits, no warning, walked in with clipboards and federal badges, asked for Jackson. Pause. "He's remote today, of course. HR's locked in the fishbowl, server access cut, legal's scrambling." Another pause. "This is bad, like bad." I said nothing. "You didn't, was it you?" I took a slow breath, held it, then finally said, "Let's just say I've been busy." Maya was quiet for a beat, then softly, "Holy shh." I heard footsteps, a distant door slam, executives shouting down hallways, someone yelling, "Quarantine the proxy logs!" Chaos. Then she whispered, "They're asking about the risk exposure deck. Your deck. They brought a printed copy of your last presentation." Another pause. "In color, Claire. They highlighted stuff." I almost laughed. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there, blinking at the wall like it had just moved. No music, no applause, just the low hum of my refrigerator and the distant bark of someone's dog. But inside me, something cracked open. Not revenge, not rage, relief. The match I'd lit didn't fizzle out. It found fuel. I opened the portal again. Still the same message. Preliminary review in progress. But now I knew what that meant. It meant clipboards. It meant server quarantines. It meant a very pale Jackson watching from his overpriced condo, realizing the world had teeth. Minutes later, a new ping. This time from Ryan in finance. Did Jackson really think no one would catch the backdoor access path? SEC's asking about Q2 mirror transactions. It's like they already know everything. I didn't respond. Because they did. Because I told them. I stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the street like I expected to see the tremor ripple through the pavement. Of course, I didn't. Because it wasn't loud. It was surgical. And I was the scalpel. No headlines yet. No press leaks. Just a building full of C-levels pretending they weren't sweating through their tailored button-downs. And somewhere, in a corner office or Slack thread, my name was back in the room, spoken quietly, with either reverence or fear. Either way, I was back. Robert Vale returned to the office that afternoon like a ghost stepping back onto a battlefield he no longer recognized. He wasn't the same man. Maya texted me updates like it was a courtroom drama. He walked past security, no hello, straight into the glass boardroom. No coat, no coffee, eyes like knives. 10:03 a.m. He was inside. 10:09 a.m. No sign of Jackson, still working remotely. 10:17 a.m. Robert asked why the dev floor was offline. Response: server quarantine. His reply: excuse me? 1:21 p.m. Partner accounts frozen, vendors panicking. 1:28 p.m. Robert asked what the hell happened. Silence, then a mutter from someone. Maya thinks Joanne in legal. Jackson terminated the compliance lead last month. Another pause. Then the line that made me sit bolt upright. Who in God's name did you fire? I didn't laugh. Didn't cry. But that sentence? That was the collapse. Not of just Jackson, but of everything that followed him blindly. They hadn't fired a paper pusher. They'd fired the firewall. And now the building was choking on smoke. They couldn't see when I was holding the extinguisher. 1:35 p.m. Robert demanded a full incident timeline. Legal tried to hedge. He cut them off. Start with her termination. Build backward. 1:40 p.m. Maya again. They're pulling logs from your archive. Turns out I didn't just leave a footprint. I left a compliance trail. One they couldn't edit. One they couldn't unsend. One they never controlled. The dominoes were falling, and I was just watching the dust kick up from the safety of my living room. Leaves hit the window. October wind trying to watch too. I didn't reply to Maya. Didn't screenshot her messages. Didn't post. I just sat back. Not as the outcast, but as the witness. Because sometimes the loudest sound in the world is a powerful man realizing exactly who his idiot son fired. At 7:41 p.m., my phone rang. Blocked number. I let it ring twice, just so he knew I made him wait. Then I answered. Claire? No greeting, no title, just my name, gritted between the teeth of a man who had just watched his kingdom spring a leak from every sealed corner. His voice was thinner than I remembered, breathless, wounded. We need to talk, he said. Then silence. Not apology, not explanation, just the space between a man's ego and the moment he realizes he's already lost. He wasn't calling to ask. He was calling to bargain. I didn't breathe, didn't speak, just reached forward and ended the call. No monologue, no drama, no, I told you so. That silence was my signature. I rinsed out the coffee pot, then opened my laptop. One last time, not out of hope, just ritual. The portal had changed. A single line in bold. Preliminary review complete. Further action pending. Thank you for your submission. I stared, not because I was surprised, but because I knew what it meant. The bridge I'd built, held. The fire I lit, caught. The truth I carved into binary, landed. Jackson was missing. Legal was bleeding. Robert had finally read the fine print. No headlines, no press release. Just me, standing quietly in the wreckage of the empire they thought I was too polite to burn. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the stillness. Not victorious, not vindicated, just clean. He gave me a reality check. I gave him a federally time-stamped one back.